Welcome to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast, where we break down the complex and emotional process of divorce into manageable, easy-to-understand steps. I'm your host, Greer Howard, and with me is Bobby Buchanan, widely recognized as one of Illinois' top divorce attorneys, offering unmatched insight and experience in family law. Well, we are back with another episode, and we're going to kind of piggyback on our last episode. We were talking about the final 90 days, that race to the divorce and kind of that time period, and some things to be thinking about. And today we're going to go through the 10 questions that are most asked during that time period. But before we get into it, Bobby, I want to check in with you. I know that you had a little golf trip that you just came back from. So how was that? And how have you been this past week?
I've been great. Good to see you, Greer. Good to be back on this episode and definitely excited to continue the 90-day countdown talk. But yeah, I just got back from, I think it's the fifth annual guys golf trip that yours truly organizes. We started 5 years ago. We did one in Wisconsin, and we've gone to Scottsdale, and we've gone to Palm Springs. Austin, Texas was last year, and this year we went to the Denver area. And there's 12 of us. We played like 90 holes of golf in a 3 or 4 day period, and it was a blast. I don't know how much I've talked about it on this podcast, but I've become a huge golf addict. And I mentioned to you earlier, when I quit drinking, there was a big kind of question mark in my head of like, do I like golf and drinking, or do I like just golf? Will I like golf without drinking? Turns out I love it. I think it's one of the best things in the world for mental health, and just for me, it's given me, it's like a nice, really great hobby to kind of de-stress and enjoy the company of my friends and all that. So it was a fantastic time.
I love it. And probably by not drinking, you're probably a better golfer, Bobby. Let's be honest.
Slightly, although, I'm not like a great, I'm not a great golfer. I'm like a 18 or 19 handicap, which, is decent, but it's kind of in that zone where the guys that do drink that I golf with, it's kind of like bowling, where like maybe 1 or 2 drinks loosens you up a little bit, gets you swinging a little bit better. Anything more than that, you're probably losing your stride.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you mentioned this is your 5th year that you've been on this trip, and I think you said 12 guys, which is pretty impressive. You're going to some really fun places. But this podcast is about divorce, Bobby. So I got to ask, are all the wives on board? Does anybody, not appreciate this guy's golf trip, or what are those dynamics like?
Yeah, great question. I think, the short answer is, yeah, they're all on board, and it's something that I think we talk about it before, of like, how can we make sure that we're communicating this trip to our wives? They have plenty of notice that it's coming, that we're doing, check-ins with our wives while we're there, or at least, making sure. I was telling some of the guys that when I'm on this trip, my wife, she doesn't even reach out to me. Like she doesn't text me good morning. She doesn't text me good night. And she really does that for me. Like she wants for me to feel like it's really my time away. I was talking about this with a couple friends, and I'm like, if my wife did that, it would be a trap. And if I didn't, communicate back, she would be kind of upset by it. And then the most interesting one I found was, one of my friends is in a newer relationship, about 7-8 months they've been dating, and he was the one where it was kind of the most high maintenance situation, where he was trying to navigate kind of the first big trip away from his partner and figuring out how to communicate. So I think, we all have different needs. All relationships have different needs depending on how long we've been together, what our particular dynamic is. But for the most part, I think we all navigate it well. And it's all about, when you come back, can you seamlessly get back into where you were as a couple? And I have to report that everything was A-okay. And, makes it a lot easier for me, honestly, that I'm not like, a big partier, I guess. Like, these trips could be seen as a way for the guys to get away from the relationship, but that's not really their relationship, should I say, but their day to day. They are going to drink a little bit more, stay out a little bit longer. They don't have to put the kids to bed. There's none of that for me since I don't drink. I go to bed by 10 p.m. I'm up by 6 a.m. So it's kind of a non-issue.
Yeah, well, I love it. Well, for your friend, it's not too late to get out because they're just dating, and for you, I mean, your wife just gets cooler and cooler. So I love that you guys have that dynamic when you're away.
Indeed. I'm a blessed man. I have to
Yes,
say.
yes, you are. All right. Well, today we are going to be talking about the top 10 most asked kind of pre-divorce questions. And we're in that again, that kind of that 90-day countdown period where, you're heading toward actually getting divorced. So let's go through these questions, Bobby, and get them answered. So number one, should I move out before filing?
So the big one here is don't move out if you have kids. I mean, like, that's the number one thing. If you have kids, then you want to be really, really careful about when you move out, how you move out, because if you move out when you have kids and you don't take the kids, then you can kind of fall into being the every other weekend parent very easily. The parent that is taking care of the kids primarily, where the kids stay, starts to have a little bit more control in the custody situation. So you got to be really careful with that. Like, that's the big one. If you don't have kids, then it can be a lot simpler. And sometimes the answer is, if you have the opportunity to move out, then you should do it, because you guys are at each other's throats all the time, or maybe it's a really awkward kind of silence that's at the house and you can't communicate. And part of the divorce process is separation. So if you can figure that piece out before the lawyers get involved, or there's heavy lawyer involvement, then that's one less thing that we have to work through. That's, and ultimately one less thing means it's going to be cheaper and faster. So those are the two things. If you have kids, don't move out. If you don't have kids, then it could make a lot of sense to move out.
Okay. All right. Do I need a separate bank account right now?
Short answer is no. I mean, let's think about it. The person asking this question, they might be worried about maybe their paycheck has always been going into the joint bank account. Maybe there's concerns, if there are concerns, about the other side pulling money out of the joint account, or money moving rapidly around and being wasted away. Then it could make sense to open your own account, if you need to protect money in some sort of way. Yeah, it could make sense. On the other hand, by making these sorts of changes, we run the risk of losing trust with the other side. We're kind of upending the apple cart, or whatever the expression is, and that can make settlement discussions a little bit more difficult. So there's not like one right or wrong answer here. It's not illegal to open your own bank account and to start putting your paycheck into that account. But if you start putting it into another account and you stop paying the mortgage out, or you've always paid the mortgage out of the joint account, and then the joint account is now going down, and maybe there's not enough money for the mortgage, that could lead to litigation that's unnecessary in the case. So it's one of those things where we want to be strategic about it, and really ask, well, why are we doing it? Why are we changing what we've done just because we're about to file? Just filing doesn't change kind of the legal significance of most areas of the marriage. So most people start opening their own accounts either at the tail end of a divorce or once the divorce is finalized.
Okay. And at this stage, even if you do open a separate bank account, that's still considered like mutual money, correct?
Absolutely. You have learned so much. It is, just because you start putting money into your own bank account doesn't make it just your money. I think that's a good kind of lead into just a refresher on how marital property works and what when we get divorced, we divide all marital property. And what marital property is anything acquired during the marriage. It doesn't matter if it's just got our name on it. So let's say the whole 10 years of the marriage, I've been putting my paycheck into my bank account that doesn't have my wife's name on it. Doesn't matter. Half of that bank account is still hers. Even if you've been, taking that money and then putting into stocks that are just in your name or investment accounts that are just in your name, doesn't matter. Half of it is going to be hers, or an equitable distribution of it, which is usually 50-50. So moving it into that bank account with just your name on it does not change the marital quality of that money.
Okay, great point. All right, number 3, can I date without hurting my custody case?
I know that this is a tough one because I know how much dating, and I think in a lot of relationships and a lot of marriages, the romance, the partnership has been dead for a long time before that 90-day countdown starts. And people get lonely. I mean, there's a reason that lots of people want to be in relationships. Some people are great being on their own. I was never that person. I was a serial monogamist, by the way. I think I lived with like 3 or 4 long-term girlfriends before I got married. I was someone who never did well alone, I guess. And I don't think I'm alone. I think usually when we think about our own selves, and our own characteristics, we're not extraordinary. I don't think I'm extraordinary. I think I'm kind of like par for the course. So I think there's a lot of people out there that probably feel a little bit lonely when they're not with someone. So if you're in a relationship that has been kind of dead for a while, you probably want to get out on the dating scene. You probably want to find that person that's going to fill that part of you that hasn't been filled. And you can't do that when you're fighting for custody as easily. It just causes a lot of problems. It causes jealousy issues. Introducing somebody to your kids causes issues. It way overcomplicates things. And so it's something you should really reconsider. I know that that's going to fall on deaf ears for a lot of people. So at least talk to your lawyer about your relationship and get some advice on the do's and don'ts of being in a relationship when you're getting divorced. Because let's be honest, there could be some positives. They could help you keep your head on your shoulders while you're going through this process, and that could be really helpful. And it could be something that somebody you truly do love and care about, and maybe you're going to get remarried. So we're not robots here. I can't easily just say, no, don't date someone. Like,
would you say maybe ideally don't introduce them to the kids? I mean, could that be a line maybe to draw if you could?
Absolutely. I think that that's an easy line to draw. Keep the relationship on the DL as much as possible. Don't be posting about this person on social media. Don't be introducing them to your kids. Definitely don't be spending large amounts of money on them. That can actually have serious financial implications in your divorce. If you're going to be dating, it's really got to be on the DL. So really nobody knows about it and it doesn't affect anything. And you can communicate that. You should be able to communicate that with the person that you're dating, that you're going through this process. Again, I'm not here to get into the morality of this or anything like that, whether it's right or wrong from that perspective to be dating. I just speak to realities and the pragmatic nature of how people are. So if you are going to be dating and an attorney's advice to say, hey, you shouldn't be dating is not going to make you break up with this person, you got to be really careful about it.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So number 4, will the kids have to talk to a judge?
99.9% of the time, the answer is no. They're not going to have to talk to a judge. It's only in serious situations where there's something called an in-camera interview, and that's where the kids go in and talk to the judge about something. But it is in such drastic cases, such sad cases, such severe cases that I don't think it's really it makes sense to touch on here. It's not something that you should be worried about in your case of like, oh, if I file this, then the kids are going to have to get involved. There's a much better chance that if your case is contested, you and your spouse just cannot agree on the custody situation, and there's clear signals that you aren't going to be able to figure it out in mediation, that no one's willing to give, then there's a high likelihood that you're going to have a guardian ad litem involved. And that's an attorney that's appointed by the court, that is the eyes and the ears of the court. They're basically the substitute for the kids having to talk to the judge. This guardian ad litem acts kind of as a social worker, and they will most likely meet the kids, talk with the kids. It's not going to be a heavy interrogation. Their job is to make actually this process as smooth on the kids as possible, but they will be meeting them. And those meetings, those are true professionals that do those meetings, and they have their techniques for making sure that it's as low stress as possible for the kids. But that's entirely avoidable as well. If you two can figure out the custody situation on your own or through mediation, then we don't have to get the GALs involved either.
Yeah. All right. So number 5, when does child support start in Illinois?
So child support will start officially when there's a court order for one party to pay the other party child support, and that can start early in the case. A very standard practice for attorneys is to file the petition for dissolution of marriage, which is the divorce paperwork that starts the case. And then with that, or shortly after they file that, they file a motion for temporary child support, saying, let's get child support rolling while we figure out this divorce case. And once that order is entered, then child support starts from the other side. In practice, it makes a lot of sense if it is a child support type case to start paying it or something close to it even before that process starts. I think it maintains goodwill. It's what you're going to have to do anyway. The other side, if it's a child support case, most likely needs that money. It's going to help the kids. And then the other part of it is, once the petition for dissolution of marriage is filed and that initial motion is filed for child support, then the court order for child support is going to date back to that filing. So if we file that in July and then there's not actually a court order entered until December, you're going to be obligated to pay basically like 6 months or whatever that is from July to December, 5 months of back pay child support. So something important to talk to your attorney about, and hopefully your attorney will advise you of this, of like, hey, they've filed this child support request. You're going to be legally on the hook most likely from the date of this filing. So let's figure out what the child support amount is right now, or at least something close to it, and get an arrangement going where you're paying it to the other side.
Okay. Well, that sounds expensive, Bobby. And while we're on expensive things, the question number 6 is, can I make big purchases during this 90-day countdown?
Well, there's nothing stopping you, but it's definitely against the advice of most attorneys. There might be some strategic exception that I can't even think of right now as far as why it might make sense to make some big purchase. I mean, I suppose if you are navigating a separation and maybe there's like interest rates are low and they're supposed to go high and it's a good opportunity to buy another house, I could see it working and making sense, but you wouldn't want to do it without a written agreement as to the significance of that property. Because here's my biggest worry when a client does that is they make a big purchase, usually a piece of real estate, and then that real estate goes up in value significantly. That increase in value is a marital asset. And we've had cases where people have done that and they cost themselves $100,000 because that asset increased in value. And then they had to split that and they had to figure out where to get that $100,000 to pay their client. On the other side, if it's not real estate, if it's not an asset that is going to be going up in value, it could be looked at as dissipation. You know, if you buy $100,000 car because you're just like, screw it, midlife crisis is on, let's go. That $100,000 car, as soon as you drive it off the lot, is worth 70,000 or whatever it may be, and now that could be seen as dissipation because you just took $100,000 and turned it into 70. So really, any sort of big purchase, the short answer is no. If you think there's some compelling reason why you want to do it, talk to your lawyer and they can explain to you those risks, and then you do what you want to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That sounds like it can get a little tricky. So, yeah, definitely want to watch out for those big purchases. And speaking of tricky, all right, will my text messages be used in court? Because sometimes when you're going through a divorce, people fire off some things on those text messages that they probably do not want to be read in court.
Yes. And I think last episode, we talked a little bit about communication strategies and, when you're fired up and you want to say something, it's probably good to wait 24 hours. So, yes, text messages can be used against you in court. Really, anything. It's just like in the movies. Anything you say or do could be used against you in a court of law. I mean, it's the same thing in divorce. It's a court of law. The biggest thing about text messages is, like an email, like a post on social media, it is in writing. It's a lot, people say things and then in court they say, oh, I never said that. And then it's hard to prove that they actually did say it. It's really easy to prove you said something when you texted it to the other side. So be careful about what you say in text message. Keep it very high level. Keep it diplomatic, because yes, it's written and it can be used against you.
I was curious about, how now it's not just text messages. There's also apps like WhatsApp or different apps that people can use. Is that the same thing? Like, are those other apps able to be used? Like Instagram, like people, text, like message on social media. It's not just like text message anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Any of those can be used against you. I mean, you're putting it in writing, it's going to somebody else. All I need, like, if you send me a message that could be used against you, like, let's say you send me a message that says, you're never seeing the kids. I'm going to do everything in my power so that the kids, like, basically think they don't have a father anymore. That is a very serious message that could be used against you to show that you're not the parent that should be the primary parent. You're not going to facilitate a relationship between me and the kids. All I need to do is screenshot that message, print it off for my lawyer, and then he can start attaching it to exhibits, attaching it to motions as an exhibit. Maybe there's some sort of hearing in court. I'm giving testimony. My lawyer says something like, has your spouse ever sent you any messages about X, Y, and Z? And I say, yes, she sent me one on March 15th. And then he shows me a picture of it and says, is this an accurate representation of the message? And there you go. It's in evidence, and the judge can consider that as part of the case. So,
yeah.
Got to be.
I think it's an important one to realize, because it's not just text and email anymore. There's so many ways that people communicate. So just make sure in all of those areas you're, keeping it clean.
Keep it clean and just keep it civil anyway. Even if it couldn't be used against you, like, come on. We're trying to get through this divorce in a smart way, fast, private way. Sending these vitriolic messages to the other side is a little short-sighted, to say the least, if you ask me. So
for sure. Very immature. Okay. So question number 8, who pays the mortgage while we separate?
The status quo is usually the guiding, is kind of the North Star here. And what I mean by that is, like, if you've been paying the mortgage, then you're probably the one that should continue paying the mortgage. When the status quo gets disrupted, and if you say, well, you just told me you wanted a divorce from me, you just told me that you hired a lawyer, or you just served me, I'm not paying this mortgage anymore, you're probably going to get a motion served on you pretty quick from the other side, a motion called a motion to maintain the status quo, saying that you've been paying the mortgage, you've been paying the utilities, you've been paying the car note, and now you've stopped and you need to be ordered to start again. So whatever has been happening is what should continue happening throughout the divorce process, unless a court order or other agreement changes that.
So, Bobby, we talked a little bit about emails and text messages that are between the spouse, right? So, if it's the message is going to you or is from you, but what about emails or messages that are not to you, but maybe they're about you and they are relevant to the case? What happens there? Can the spouse actually read those emails, read those text messages? What happens there?
Yeah, so this is a lot more common these days with shared tablets, a shared laptop, or even your spouse's password to their phone. And once you get into someone's phone, you can see all sorts of things. I mean, most of us, we have our password to our phone, but then once you open the phone, you can get into the email, the Instagram, the photos, whatever else it may be. So are you doing anything wrong there? Well, in all the cases that I've seen, if you're getting into if you're getting into the email or the text messages in that way, um, there's no court that's going to like prosecute you for that, because it really can be seen as, well, you had permission to do that. They gave you the email password, or they gave you the phone password at some time, or they left the tablet out on the kitchen table. Like, clearly they didn't have any expectation of privacy if they're doing that. It becomes pretty evident early on in cases whether or not someone has access to the other person's email. We find out about it in one way or the other, and then we're usually telling our client to change their password, create a new email, lock things down a bit. I don't want to sound naive here, but at the same time, like, I'm just such a big believer in taking the high road in this process in order to build trust, that even if you do have access to their private communications, I would invite you to, one, not take advantage of that access, maybe even tell them that you're not comfortable having that access anymore. I just don't think it's strategically, it makes a lot of sense. I think it could blow back in your face. I don't think it's good karma to do it. And it could lead to litigation just because you have their password. Just because the tablet's been left out doesn't mean the other side can't make an argument for you violating their privacy in some way, or um, you know, being shady in the process. And then the other lawyer on the other side wants to get really litigious and point the finger at you and make it look like you're the one doing things wrong in the process. They could file a motion, and now you're fighting over it. So there's so many reasons to just do things on the up and up, and just be careful with that sort of access. So it could happen if you're on the other side. Lock down your email, change your passwords, don't leave your tablet out, because it can happen, and someone could use that little bit of information against you.
Yeah. Okay, final question, Bobby. Number 10. How long will this really take if we stay civil?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? From the point at which you say, I want a divorce, to when you are divorced, depends on how long it takes, depends on the status of your relationship. Maybe this was 5 years in the making, and you saying that was, it's like, yeah, obviously, okay, let's start and actually finalize this thing and get it done. If you keep it civil in that context, you could be done in like 8 weeks. If you haven't really, if both sides really haven't emotionally started processing this whole thing, I think it's going to take longer. I think it's probably going to take 3 or 4 months to get it all done, maybe 6 months. But if you keep it civil and keep it out of court, there's a very high likelihood that you can get the case done in 6 months or less. I think it's fair. And, our firm record for getting a divorce done, I think, is like 12 days or something. So
wow.
yeah, it
Yeah,
can
and
be
the less time you take, the less money you spend. That's for sure too.
absolutely. And the more you keep it diplomatic, the more of these kind of logistical things you've figured out already. Okay, you've already moved out. Maybe there are kids involved and you've moved out, and you already are doing a 50-50 schedule. You've figured out how you're paying for extracurriculars already. You've already divided the proceeds of the house or started the refi process. All of that stuff is going to help get this done quicker.
Yeah. Well, Bobby, that wraps up our 10 most asked questions for pre-divorce. So if you guys have any additional questions, please feel free to mention in the comments and we can address it in a further episode. But until then, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you for listening to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast. We hope today's episode gave you clarity and support as you move forward on your journey. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Tune in next week for more insights and expert advice on the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast.